Hello and welcome to the show. Pretty much since the dawn of the motor car, there have been manufacturer rivalries, and certainly none so great as to, well, when it comes to motorsport. Australia, you have the classic Ford versus Holden battles. At Le Mans, you had Ford trying to beat Ferrari. You had the entirety of the 60s muscle cars wars, Dodge versus Chevrolet for the ultimate super muscle car, the Corvette versus the Viper, Subaru versus Mitsubishi, the 90s Japanese sports cars, and, well, currently Tesla versus quality control. It has all been very, very exciting, and it's created some massively historic events, motorsports, showdowns, and so on. All very exciting. However, they have tended to focus on a particular area, a particular category, or a particular event. What happened if we wanted to do a more general showdown, a more overall championship, if you like? Well, that was the plan. We were going to take 16 manufacturers across 4 different rounds for our little showdown, and these would be tackling 4 very different disciplines. We would have a circuit race, a drift event, and that would be using the Forza drift scoring system, since it's the easiest thing to give us a nice number at the end of all of that, a rallycross event, and a shuttle run to finish off. So your cars would have to be dealing with all sorts of different scenarios. And to make things a little bit more challenging, we would only have 2,500 PI to spread across our 4 cars, and they had to be 4 different cars, couldn't just be a different build on a vehicle. Now what that means is you could choose to use your PI points. This is the way Forza rates cars in terms of performance. You could choose to build all of your cars to a roughly even standing. That way you would have hopefully a consistent finish across all 4 of the events. Now, you weren't going to be winning anything doing that. Somebody was always going to build specialist cars for a certain event. However, you hope to score consistent points. You could go for the very aggressive strategy. Build 2 cars to the top of S-Class. Now, we were limiting this that no car could exceed S-Class because, we only have a certain selection of cars in Forza, so some manufacturers will be a big disadvantage. Everyone will be able to get some stuff to the top of S. Yeah, you could build cars to the top of S-Class for, let's say, 2 particular events, and you would have the PI to do that, but for the other 2 events, you wouldn't have very much at all. You'd have to sacrifice those. I was going to be representing Dodge in all of this, and my plan was to go fairly aggressively, not full-on aggressive, with, 2 max S-Class cars, but I would have 2 S-Class vehicles in my selection, with a plan of my other cars being able to score fairly consistent points as well. Didn't really know if that strategy was going to be the way to go, but I would have some nice muscle cars and so on to drive, so I was fairly happy with my selection, and going into the first round felt that, I could certainly do well with the Dodges. Now, the first event was the straight-up circuit race. This would head to the Catalunya National Circuit. Now, with a random grid, it would turn out that the game was very kind to some of the very high PI cars. This NSX, Corvette, Alfa Romeo, and Subaru would all be max PI S-Class cars. Now, that is 4 cars in that little space that have used up a fair amount of their PI points all in one go, but they are running towards the front of this race, and they need to be, well, outscoring one another because, they're all even in terms of the PI. The NSX would lead the way. Now, we did allow kind of rebadged cars to fall in manufacturers. For example, the NSX, technically we have the Acura one in this game, but we allow it to run as Honda because it's just the same thing. The Corvette missed the braking point into the hairpin, managing to skate its way in between the NSX and the Alfa Romeo. Somehow everybody managed to stay out of trouble in all of that one. The Alfa looking for a way past, although you're not going to find too much space heading in towards these final corners here, and sure enough, the 33 thinks better of trying to find a way past in all of that. The Subaru was in 3rd place, but coming under threat from the Corvette. Chevrolet looking to make up some ground. A little bit of a laggy Alfa Romeo, don't worry about that. BMW, also another car at max PI for this race. Has a little bit of a late dive, but does just about manage to pull it up in time. Subaru continuing to fight the fight. Is around the outside, can't quite hold it. The BMW faster car of the two in a straight line. The Subaru that little bit faster in terms of acceleration. In the end, the BMW able to get clear, while a Ferrari that was a fairly low S-Class car was not so far behind in this group. And if you could make a car, 20, 40, 50 PI lower than the cars, well, up ahead work, then that would be very helpful. You'd have saved PI and be able to use that in another event. I had got an S-Class car. Mine was only just into S-Class. It was 10 points into S-Class. My plan had been in this event to be able to score some pretty solid points. I knew that there would be plenty of people build specialist cars for the circuit race, as we'd have a go up the inside of an A-Class Alpine. I knew there were going to be plenty of people build specialist cars for this. After all, being a channel that focuses on circuit racing, the kind of guys that we're doing with this are most comfortable with circuit racing. So I didn't want to burn burn a fully specialist car on this particular event, knowing that there'd be a lot of them, and I could use all of my PI points and end up in a 4th or 5th place. So my plan was to build a fast car that I could score some solid points with, but not a car that would kind of cost me too much. I say cost me too much, but yeah, score solid points, knowing I wasn't going to be fighting necessarily at the front. Speaking of the front, the battle for the lead would continue with the NSX holding up a little bit, the Alpha 33. Now, these 33s are notorious for being unbelievably fast cars, although they are not the easiest things to get working. You can see how much this one is moving around on its suspension. They do some peculiar things unless you've got the suspension tuned absolutely perfectly. So we head down towards turn 1. You can see how much it's diving under brakes. The Alfa Romeo tries to get to the inside, can't quite pull off that manoeuvre, and that moment in time is still having a look around, bobbing and weaving and diving about, but is continuing to harass that NSX as we head up towards the top of the hill, although trying to get overtakes, these are pretty damn fast cars. Trying to get overtakes through some of these corners is not so easy. Again, up towards this back chicane, he's having a look, but nowhere near close enough. Volvo were being represented in this particular race with the S60 estate car. The V60 estate car. This was just into S-Class, much like my Viper had gone for a try and score some solid points with the vehicle without spending too much PI. The problem was there were quite a lot of cars with high PI that were running quite well, and we were getting a little bit ensnared by some of the A-Class cars. The Mercedes was the top A-Class vehicle, as was the Renault Alpine, and we were getting stuck in battles in this little group. The Volvo would get the pass done, although it wasn't so easy keeping that Alpine behind. Although, while yes, the Volvo was in S-Class, it was only a couple of points higher than that Alpine. Now, one particular car had gone for a very different strategy. Now, one of the few going for the spread the PI out more evenly across a lot of the cars was Ford. Seeing, a vast number of cars turning up here in S-Class and very high A-Class and so on, the Ford was in B. This was going to be the Ford's throwaway round. Kind of a clever tactic, with so many cars going for that high PI approach, with so many cars in this race going for the quicker approach. Having this as a throwaway round means that PI can be used in other events where other drivers are likely have sacrificed stuff. So yeah, it's going to be a lonely race. The Ford, being the lone B-Class car in this one, was miles back with very little going on around it. In fact, I think that was the leaders coming around in the background to get up towards lapping the Focus. Yeah, not a particularly exciting race for the Focus, but a tactical decision, and I think quite a clever one in some ways. Back towards the front of the field, while sadly the Chevrolet would have some technical difficulties, a little bit of a lag out, this would become the battle over 4th place. The Subaru trying to fend off an incredibly quick Ferrari F50. Again, another car, if you are familiar with Forza, you'll know how fast these F50s can be when tuned up for circuit racing. And the Ferrari was about 25 PI points into S-Class and harassing the back of Max S-Class Subaru. Now, the Subaru had the speed. no doubt about that, when it comes to the acceleration, when it comes to this main straight. However, the Ferrari was very, very quick through the corners, although the F50 not having the easiest time, of course, trying to overtake the Subaru. Yes, it can outbrake better, outbrake the Subaru, it can outturn the Subaru, but it's got to be in the right place to make a pass stick, because the Subaru is going to launch away from it every time they get to a straight. At the front, and it would be the NSX that would hold on to the lead. A mistake from the Alfa Romeo chasing him would drop the Alfa back. I think Alfa would briefly drop back to third, would get back past the BMW, and would start catching up again to the back of the NSX. The 33 proving perhaps a little bit of a handful, but you can see how much it's moving, how much of a handful that sort of car is to drive, which means in the first round, it would be Honda that would claim a victory with the NSX. The Alfa Romeo coming home in second, with BMW in third. All of these cars here, max PI S-Class cars, as, was kind of expected in this event. You can actually see they're coming up towards towards lapping the Nissan. Again, another car that gone for fairly low PI. Not quite as low as the Ford, but another car gone for low PI. The battle for fourth was perhaps the closest finish of the race. The Ferrari still looking for that way past. We're coming towards the final sector. This is where the F50 is going to be strong through these tight, twisty parts. Although this is a very, very narrow section. The F50 has got a Ferrari-sized gap and just about nothing more. The Subaru's got speed on the outside, but can't take that through the final turn. It doesn't have the grip. He has, though, got the acceleration as they want to run up towards the line. It's going to be too late, though, as the Ferrari would get it. A little bit of a strange, laggy collision going on after the finish line, and the Ferrari ends up very sideways indeed. But it is after they had crossed the lines. And a great showing and a very, very good round for the Ferrari, managing to score a fourth place and saving a lot of PI points on the cars around him. Further back, another close finish. I would clear the Mercedes, and the Mercedes would manage to hold up the Volvo. Holden, that had had a little bit of an unlucky race, was recovering through the field. A mid S-Class Holden, this one, trying to recover his way up through the field, but he ran out of time to do very much about the cars ahead. Not a great round, particularly for the Holden in all of this. Again, once you sort of fall back that little bit, difficult to recover, even with all of the extra PI, all of the extra speed. So, the first round, it would be the Honda that takes the victory from Alfa Romeo, BMW in third. An excellent fourth place for Ferrari ahead of Subaru. Jaguar running an XJ220, kind of a mid-S-Class car, sat a little bit in no man's land, but sixth is some good points. Well, I would get seventh with my Dodge. Had hoped for a little bit more, but yeah, I just didn't quite have the pace. But again, I had saved PI. Likewise, Mercedes in eighth, but that was with an A-Class car. So again, solid points without too much PI. Volvo would get 9th ahead of Holden in 10th. Renault, the Alpine, tried to cling on in A-Class. Wasn't quite got the performance of that Mercedes. And then we come to the area of the table where, well, drivers have tried to save PI. The Mazda struggled a little bit being a mid-A-Class car. The Nissan, again, similar sort of PI. The Vauxhall was S-Class, but it was front-wheel drive, and the Astra did not have fun. Did not have fun in all ahead of Ford, with Chevrolet disconnecting, sadly. Would only score 1 point, which is a problem for Chevrolet, having burnt that PI and technical difficulties failing them. On to the second round. It would be to some drifting. An unusual sight here at FailRace, and this is the round where a lot of drivers were going to be sacrificing. A lot of drivers will be trying to make the minimum amount of upgrades work on their cars. I was in a D-Class car. Now, of course, going for Dodge meant I had options to play around with classic muscle cars, which means lots of power with very little in the way of PI, and my hope was I could make that work. I stuck a supercharger and a diff, I think, in my charger and hoped for the best, and it did work. It did work, and honestly, if I was a better drifter, I think I could probably have done okay in this round. Truth be told, I think it could have done with more power. I tried to sacrifice as much PI as I could in this to try and, well, just get through the round and score some points. I knew I wasn't going to be very good myself, so yeah, just kind of get through the round and hope that I could sneak another, decent midfield finish perhaps with my D-Class Charger. But yeah, I wasn't quite able to string everything together. Now, unlike with the circuit racing, you didn't need to have a max S-Class car to be competitive here, but it was about finding a balance between going for a minimal amount of PI to save it for other events, and still having the power and the control that you might want in your vehicle to get it around this Suzuka course. Now, the judging, as I said, would be done by the Forza drift points. Okay, I know not the most accurate of measures and so on, but it is an easy thing. We're all working, to the same thing, and it gives us a nice round score at the end. And this will be based on the best lap. Now, we had, I think it was about 8 minutes around here in which to set our best lap. It might have been 10 minutes, I can't remember, a little while ago we filmed it. Yeah, and this was all about the best overall lap, and the Volvo was doing very, very well indeed. The 850R rear-wheel drive converted. Now, there was no rules against going for an all-wheel drive car in this, but I highly doubt anyone did. The simple reason being that to get the all-wheel drive cars to work as well as the rear-wheel drive cars, they'd have to have had more power, and that would have cost you PI. And in an event where most drivers are trying to skimp on PI, you're not going to be wanting to go down that route. Another vehicle that was doing very well, and of course, you can tell it's a FailRace drift event where the vehicles to watch are a Volvo 850R and a Holden Sandman. Yes, they were indeed the vehicles to be watching in all of this, and I love the silliness. I love the collection of cars that we've got going on here. I mean, in this little shop, we've got a Sandman, we've got my Charger, there's a Subaru BRZ going around. There was a classic Ferrari, it was a 250 California, going around here. The big Volvo estate car. I mean, this is the sort of collection of vehicles that you want. You might also notice we've got collisions turned off in all of this, with us lot being mostly completely inexperienced, fair few cars going for spins around the place. We didn't want, sort of people having their runs ruined by a car being spun in front of them. A Mercedes, as you would expect, the AMG nutters, pretty drifty from standard. Now, the difficulty that some manufacturers had, of course, is with slightly more limited car selection, or with a car selection focused a lot more towards sort of higher-end vehicles with higher PI, you perhaps can't skimp quite as much on PI in, let's say this sort of event. You might not quite have the vehicles to go for lower PI. Mercedes, of course, you do have some classic cars they could have gone for. Instead, though, this one going for the C-Class AMG car. Certainly plenty of sideways stuff. Now, speaking of the classic cars, well, a lot of us kind of went for big power. The BMW driver would go for tiny tyres. This was in E-Class. Now, that is really saving. I mean, I thought I'd skimped, and I did have one of the lowest PIs with my Charger, but E-Class is really skimping on the PI, and it didn't have very much power whatsoever. However, being on really, really thin tyres meant that it had no grip at all, so was slippery sideways sliding around, as well as cars with, 3 or 4 times as much power. Now, Romeo was having trouble with the handling of that vehicle. So yeah, there were varying strategies going on. However, the really ultra low PI tactic, if you like, didn't work for everybody. Jaguar also going for an E-Class car. However, with the Mark II, it had too much grip and too little power. It just really wasn't capable, and that made it very difficult. You had to get very aggressive, and then that leads to little mistakes, like a slight wheel on the grass and so on. So yeah, if you go for too little power, too little PI, that's not necessarily going to help you. You really needed to have a car with, well, small enough amount of grip. The Jaguar did not look like a fun vehicle to try and get any sort of drifty performance out of it. I think the highest PI car we had in this was around a mid-B class. Yeah, as long as you got enough power to get that back end sliding, you could kind of hold it through some of these longer sequences, that would be okay. But the Jag was, not quite working. So the overall finishing results in all of this, Volvo would take a victory ahead of the Holden Sandman, the Mercedes coming home in third. A D-Class Ferrari, the California, would get fourth place. Again, very, very good use of PI for that Ferrari to get fourth ahead of a Renault. Yeah, that was a Clio Williams rear-wheel drive swap that got fifth. BMW in sixth ahead of Honda. Ford in eighth ahead of Chevrolet. Subaru 9th, I could only manage 11th though with my Dodge, which was a little bit of a problem. A little bit of concern. I'd hoped to do better. I felt like I could have done just bad runs from me. Vauxhall in 12th ahead of Nissan, Alfa Romeo 14th, Mazda 15th, and Jaguar in 16th. So after the first 2 rounds of all of this, Honda would take a slender lead, only 2 points clear of Volvo. BMW in second, used a lot of PI on the first car, however, skimped an awful lot with that second one, tied with Ferrari. BMW third on virtue of a higher finishing position. Mercedes up in 5th. Holden would take 6th. Alfa Romeo might have had a poor round in the drift event, but did score a 2nd place in the race. Subaru would take 8th. 9th goes to Renault. My Dodge in 10th. I'd had hoped to be a little better off in terms of points. Still just about in touch with the guys higher up, and my stronger events were to come. Jaguar would take 11th ahead of Ford. Chevrolet in 13th. Vauxhall in 14th ahead of Nissan and Mazda. So, after the first 2 rounds, it is all very, very close indeed. Only a few points separating a large number of vehicles. What was becoming clear, the whole middle-of-the-road strategy wasn't working out massively well. The likes of, the Vauxhall, Mazda, Nissan, Ford, that had sort of spread the PI out more evenly across all of their cars, weren't able to get sort of consistent results so far. Of course, still 2 more events to go. My strategies, my plans with the Dodges weren't quite working out as I had hoped either. Being able to score perhaps a little bit more consistent points. I was okay. I was still within touching distance, but 10th overall. Needed to improve. Needed some improvements to come in the later events, although they were likely to be my stronger events at least. That, though, is going to be it for this video. I'm afraid you'll have to wait until tomorrow evening to find out the winner of this epic competition. Will Honda be able to continue at the top? Can Volvo closing? BMW and Ferrari are only 4 points behind that leader. So, yeah, still an awful lot to play for. That'll be it from me, though. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.